The first rule of the support group was simple: never, ever arrive early. The second rule was even simpler: never, ever leave alone. These weren't just guidelines, they were lifelines, etched into the psyche of every member who gathered in the dimly lit community center basement every Tuesday night. They were the survivors, the ones who had looked into the eyes of their own reflection walking in the world and lived to tell the tale. The group was their sanctuary, the only place they didn't have to pretend the boogeyman wasn't real, because they had all met him, and he looked just like them. Tonight, there was a new face. His name was Arthur. He sat hunched in one of the worn-out plastic chairs, his hands wrapped around a paper cup of lukewarm coffee. He looked terrified, which was normal. His story, however, was a little too perfect. He said he'd been on his way home from work, saw himself walking on the other side of the street, smiling at passersby. This other Arthur had waved at him, a lazy, confident gesture, before disappearing into the evening crowd. He'd run home, barricaded the door, and found the group online. Everyone nodded, their expressions a mixture of sympathy and shared trauma. But Sarah, the group's unofficial leader, felt a prickle of unease. Arthur's story was a textbook case, almost a summary of their collective experiences. Most survivors stumbled upon their double by accident. A blurred reflection in a shop window, a mistaken identity shouted across a busy street. The doppelgangers were usually elusive, shy. Waving was bold, arrogant even. Over the next few weeks, the unsettling feeling grew. The support group had a list of safety protocols, developed through bitter experience. Always carry a unique, hard-to-replicate personal item. Never share your daily routine in detail. Use a secret passphrase with loved ones. Arthur agreed to everything, but with an unnerving eagerness. He seemed to be studying their methods, taking mental notes with an intensity that went beyond simple fear. He'd ask probing questions. So this passphrase, how often do you change it? Or what kind of item works best? Something with a scratch? A specific memory attached. It felt less like he was seeking comfort and more like he was conducting research. Then came the inconsistencies. He mentioned a scar on his left hand from a childhood accident. A week later, when he reached for the sugar, Sarah saw his left hand, smooth and unblemished. When she asked, he just laughed it off. Oh, you know, it's so faded now you can barely see it. But she had looked closely. There was nothing there. Another time, he recounted a favorite family vacation to the mountains, but a few sessions later, he spoke of his lifelong fear of heights and how he'd never been anywhere higher than the third floor. Each slip was small, easily dismissed on its own, but together, they painted a chilling picture. He wasn't one of them. He was one of them. He was a student, and this support group was his classroom. He was learning how to be a better monster. The realization dawned on the others slowly, a creeping dread that turned their sanctuary into a trap. Glances were exchanged over Arthur's head as he spoke. A hand signal Sarah had developed for emergencies, a slow tapping of the index finger on the thigh, began to pass around the circle. They were all trapped in a room with the very thing they feared most, and he was using their own survival guide against them. They had to act, but how? Accusing him could be a death sentence. The doppelgangers were masters of mimicry, but they were also ruthlessly protective of their stolen lives. Tonight, the air was thick with unspoken terror. Arthur was telling another story, his voice calm and reassuring, but his eyes were sharp, analytical. He was talking about his close call last week, how he thought he saw his double near his apartment again. He was practicing, refining his performance. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She was about to interrupt, to call him out, to do something, when the basement door burst open with a deafening crash. Framed in the doorway was a man, his clothes torn, his face a mask of blood and dirt. He was gaunt, wild-eyed, and panting for breath. He looked exactly like the man sitting in their circle. He was the real Arthur. He pointed a trembling, bloodied finger at the imposter. That's not me," he screamed, his voice raw with panic and exhaustion. "It took my life. It took my face." For a moment, the room was frozen in absolute silence. The Arthur in the chair didn't flinch. He simply turned his head, a slow, deliberate movement, and a thin, cold smile spread across his face. It was not a human smile. It was the smile of a predator that had just cornered its prey. He stood up, his posture shifting from the nervous victim to something confident, ancient, and utterly alien. "Well," he said, his voice a perfect imitation of the real Arthur's, but laced with a chilling amusement. "This is awkward." Panic erupted. Chairs scraped and crashed as people scrambled back, away from the two Arthurs. Screams echoed off the concrete walls. Sarah fumbled for her phone, her fingers too numb to dial. It was in that chaotic moment, in the peak of their terror, that the single, bare light bulb hanging from the ceiling flickered violently. Once, twice, and then, with a soft pop, the room was plunged into absolute, suffocating darkness. The screaming stopped, replaced by ragged, terrified breaths in the black. An eternity seemed to pass in that darkness, a thick, pressing silence broken only by the sound of shuffling feet and quiet sobs. Then, the light flickered back on, but the scene it revealed was a new kind of nightmare. The room was twice as full. For every member of the group, there was now a perfect, silent duplicate. Sarah stared across the room at another Sarah, who stared back with the same horrified expression. Every survivor, every person who had sought refuge in this room, was now face to face with their own personal monster. Each pair locked eyes with their identical twin, a room full of mirrors reflecting a silent, shared scream. The hunt wasn't over. It had just begun. Find out what happens next in the next episode. Thanks for watching. If you are on the edge of your seat, don't forget to hit that like button, share this story with a friend who loves a good scare, and subscribe for the next chapter. You won't want to miss it.